The evening air carried a sharp chill as Haley stood outside the small restaurant, her fingers brushing against the worn purse she clutched tightly. Inside that purse lay a single $5 bill, folded so many times that the edges were soft and frayed. It was all she had brought with her, all she could bring, and somehow it felt heavier than the entire weight of the night ahead. For weeks she had debated whether she should even come. Tonight she had convinced herself that hope was worth at least one more try. She pulled the glass door open, and the faint jingle of the bell above her head startled her. It wasn't loud, but to Haley it sounded like an announcement, drawing invisible attention to the fact that she had stepped into a world she rarely entered. Warm air greeted her, carrying the scent of baked bread and herbs. Couples sat across from one another at small wooden tables, their laughter blending with the clinking of glasses and the soft hum of background music. Candlelight flickered across polished surfaces, painting the room in a gentle glow. Haley smoothed her dress with trembling hands. It was her mother's, a pale piece with faded stitching and seams that had begun to loosen. She had worn it only once before, on the day she graduated college, when life still felt wide open. Tonight, the fabric served as both armor and memory, wrapping her in a fragile kind of courage. She had curled her hair in her tiny apartment earlier, using the same old iron that sometimes sparked when plugged in. A touch of makeup softened her features, though she couldn't shake the worry that it wasn't enough. A hostess greeted her with a polite smile. Reservation. Haley nodded quickly, managing to say her own name clearly despite the knot in her throat. The woman led her toward a small table near the window. A single candle flickered in the center, casting shifting shadows across the empty chair that waited on the other side. Haley lowered herself into the seat carefully, setting her purse on her lap as though it might protect her. She glanced at the time. 6:45 p.m. She was 15 minutes early. That was good, she told herself. It gave her a chance to breathe, to settle her nerves. Her eyes drifted around the restaurant, trying to appear casual. Every few moments they returned to the door, as if by looking often enough she could will someone to walk through it. Her fingers brushed the edge of the menu, but she didn't dare open it. $5 wouldn't stretch far here, not even for a cup of tea, and she couldn't bear the thought of embarrassment. Still, the thought of sitting in this place, of being seen, gave her a strange mix of fear and pride. Maybe, just maybe, this evening could be different. Outside, the last of the sunlight faded, leaving only the glow of street lamps filtering through the window. Haley straightened her posture, her heart pounding in her chest. She whispered to herself, almost silently, "Please let tonight be better than the last." Haley clasped her hands tightly in her lap, the flickering candlelight casting shadows across her pale fingers. The restaurant around her moved in a rhythm she could not join, servers gliding between tables, glasses clinking, laughter spilling softly from nearby booths. Every sound seemed louder in her ears, every smile around her sharper, because it only reminded her that the seat across from her was still empty. She glanced at the door again. A couple entered, shaking off the cool night air. They smiled at each other, their conversation bubbling as though the rest of the world did not exist. Haley's heart gave a tiny lurch, then sank back into her chest. It wasn't him. She forced her gaze down to her phone, pretending to check the time. 6:55 p.m. 10 minutes had passed. That was nothing, she told herself. People ran late all the time. To ease her nerves, she opened his last message. "Can't wait to see you tonight." She read it again, searching for reassurance in the words, as if they might suddenly hold more promise than they had before. The corners of her lips lifted into a faint smile, but it faltered quickly. What if he had changed his mind? What if he had looked at her picture one last time and decided she wasn't worth showing up for? She shifted in her chair, trying to appear calm. Across the room, another pair laughed loudly as a waiter poured wine into their glasses. Their ease was effortless, the kind of ease that only came when you knew someone wanted to be there with you. Haley reached for her water glass, taking a sip to fill the silence pressing in on her. The cool liquid steadied her throat but did little for the ache building in her chest. Minutes stretched painfully. She tapped her fingers against her purse, then quickly stopped, worried the sound might draw attention. Her eyes flicked to the entrance again. Still nothing. She tried to look casual, glancing out the window as though she was simply enjoying the view. In truth, her stomach tightened with every tick of the clock. By 7:15, the weight of waiting began to crush her. She typed a short message, "I'm here, just checking in." Her thumb hovered before she hit send, then tapped the screen quickly. She set the phone down and folded her hands together again, her breath shallow as she waited for the reply. Seconds passed, then a full minute. Still silence. Around her, life went on. Forks clinked. A man leaned across the table to whisper into his date's ear, and she giggled, covering her mouth shyly. Haley's chest tightened further. The contrast was unbearable, her nervous energy against the cheerful harmony of everyone else. She stared at the candle flame in front of her, willing herself not to cry. At 7:30 she tried calling. One ring, then voicemail. She ended the call quickly, cheeks burning even though no one was watching. The realization settled heavily. She might have been stood up. Haley's phone buzzed against the wooden table, the sudden vibration startling her so much that her glass nearly tipped. Relief rushed through her in an instant. Finally he was replying. She snatched up the phone, her heart fluttering with a desperate hope that she had been wrong, that maybe traffic had delayed him, that perhaps he was only minutes away. Her eyes scanned the message. The hope vanished. "Wow, you actually went." "I was just messing with you." "Sorry, but you're not really my type." "Not worth the Uber?" Her throat tightened, as if the words had leapt off the screen and wrapped themselves around her neck. Her thumb hovered over the screen, frozen. Before she could even process the sting, another message appeared. "You seem nice, but seriously, you thought I was actually coming?" The letters blurred. She blinked hard, trying to steady her vision, but the tears pushed against her eyes anyway. Her chest felt hollow, like someone had carved out the air inside her. The noise of the restaurant faded into a dull hum, cutlery clinking, conversations rising and falling, but none of it reached her. She was alone at a table where the candle burned brighter than she did. She pressed her lips together, fighting the urge to gasp for breath. Heat crept up her cheeks, her embarrassment burning stronger than the shame itself. Around her, couples smiled, waiters moved confidently from one table to another, and she sat still. A single figure abandoned in a world that had no place for her. Haley curled her fingers tightly around the napkin in her lap, her knuckles whitening. She couldn't leave, not yet. To stand up and walk out now would feel like a public confession of her humiliation, a silent announcement that she had been foolish enough to believe. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to sit straighter. If she broke, she swore it would not be here, not in front of strangers. Her phone slipped from her trembling fingers onto the table. The screen dimmed, leaving only her reflection staring back. The pale face, the hopeful curls, the soft pink lipstick she had applied so carefully, all of it now mocked her. For a moment, she thought of her $5 bill, safe in her purse. She had guarded it like a secret, a lifeline, believing tonight would be worth the risk of spending it. Now it felt like an insult. A server passed by and glanced at her table. She shook her head quickly, pretending to be fine, lifting her water glass to her lips as though nothing was wrong. The liquid touched her tongue, but might as well have been nothing at all. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but she couldn't bring herself to eat, not like this. Her heart whispered questions she couldn't silence. Why would someone be so cruel? Why target her? Was it her dress, her picture, her words that made her unworthy? Each thought weighed her down until even the air felt heavy. Haley forced her gaze to the candle again. Its flame flickered strong and steady, unmoved by the draught, untouched by her sorrow. She wished she could be like that flame, resilient, unwavering, but inside she felt like nothing more than smoke. At the far corner of the restaurant, Ethan Blake swirled the amber liquid in his glass, the ice clinking softly as he leaned back in his chair. The day had been long, meetings stacked on meetings, decisions that felt more like battles, but here, in this dim glow of candlelight and low music, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. Or at least it had, until his eyes wandered to the girl by the window. He had noticed her the moment she walked in, not because she was loud or radiant, but because she wasn't. She had moved with hesitation, smoothing her dress, clutching her purse, as though it held her whole life. Ethan knew that look. It was the look of someone stepping into a world they weren't sure they belonged to, praying they wouldn't be asked to leave. He had turned back to his drink at first, trying to ignore it. Yet every few minutes, his gaze returned, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. He saw her eyes flick again and again to the door, hope rising and falling with each new arrival. He saw the way her lips pressed into a line when her phone vibrated, and how her shoulders stiffened after reading the message. The napkin in her lap twisted between her fingers until it nearly tore. Ethan didn't need to know the words on the screen. He recognized the posture, the barely contained humiliation. He had seen it before, on himself, years ago, sitting in another restaurant, waiting for someone who never came. Back then, he had hidden behind bravado, telling himself he didn't care. But he had cared too much. The memory pressed against him now, tugging at a scar he thought had long since healed. He let out a slow breath, trying not to stare, but his chest tightened anyway. It wasn't pity that held him, but recognition. He saw the bravery in the way she stayed seated, spine straight even as her eyes dimmed. He saw the quiet dignity in her refusal to break in public. It struck him harder than any boardroom challenge or financial loss ever had. Ethan's gaze dropped to his own table, a meal half-eaten, untouched bread, a drink sweating against the polished wood. He had everything in front of him, yet it felt hollow compared to the raw honesty playing out across the room. He thought of his daughter, of the nights she asked if people ever stopped disappointing each other. He had never known how to answer. Watching this girl, he felt the ache of that question again. He shifted slightly, catching himself before he moved closer. What right did he have to interfere? She was a stranger after all. Yet, as she sat there, staring at the candle like it was her last lifeline, Ethan knew he wouldn't be able to leave without doing something. For now, he stayed quiet, watching. Not as a man of wealth or status, but as someone who remembered what it felt like to be forgotten. Haley reached for her purse, ready to slip out quietly before the ache in her chest grew too heavy to carry. She had already convinced herself she could pretend it never happened, that leaving now would save her from further humiliation. But just as she shifted in her chair, a shadow fell across the table. "Your order, miss," the server said with a polite smile, lowering a steaming plate in front of her. The scent of herbs and garlic drifted upward, rich and inviting, followed by the sparkle of a tall glass of lemonade set carefully at her side. Haley blinked in confusion. I didn't order anything," she stammered, her fingers tightening around her purse. The server only smiled again. "It's been taken care of." "The bill is already settled." Haley froze, her mind racing. Was this another cruel trick? Had the man from the dating app somehow orchestrated this just to humiliate her further? Her heart beat wildly in her chest as suspicion battled with hunger. She shook her head slightly, unsure whether to stay or run. Then a voice came from just behind her, steady and low. "It's not charity," he said softly. "It's a reminder. You deserve to eat, even if the world tries to tell you otherwise." Haley turned sharply, her eyes widening. The man in the charcoal grey suit stood a few steps away, one hand resting on the back of his chair. His expression was calm, not mocking, not pitying, just honest. His gaze met hers with a quiet steadiness that seemed to hold her in place. Her lips parted, but no words came. For a moment all she could do was stare at him, startled by both his presence and the sincerity in his voice. He didn't look like someone performing a grand gesture. He looked like someone who simply couldn't sit still while another person suffered. The server gave a polite nod and walked away, leaving them suspended in a silence that felt both fragile and heavy. Haley looked down at the plate again. The food was warm, fragrant, alive with color. Her stomach tightened, reminding her how long it had been since she had eaten anything more than toast. "You didn't have to," she finally whispered, her voice trembling between gratitude and disbelief. "I know," he replied, pulling out the chair across from hers. He didn't wait for permission, but he didn't force himself either. He simply sat as though his place had been there all along. Haley's hands remained in her lap, fingers trembling slightly. She didn't reach for the fork yet. Instead, she studied him carefully. His suit was tailored but not flashy, his watch understated, his face composed yet softened by a trace of something unspoken. He wasn't smiling to impress her, nor did he seem to expect thanks. He simply looked at her as though she mattered. The candle flickered between them, bridging the quiet space across the table, and for the first time that night, Haley didn't feel invisible. Haley stared at the plate before her, the steam curling upward, filling the air with a fragrance that made her stomach ache with longing. Yet still she hesitated. Her fork remained untouched, as though picking it up might admit that she needed help, that she had been saved. Across from her, Ethan noticed the struggle. He leaned back slightly, giving her space, his tone even. "You don't have to eat if you're not ready," he said. "But it's there for when you are." Haley's eyes flickered up, searching his face for hidden motives. His gaze held steady, unflinching but gentle. Something about that steadiness calmed her, loosening the knot in her chest. She finally reached for the fork, her hand trembling as she took her first bite. Warmth spread across her tongue, and tears threatened to sting her eyes. Not because of the food itself, but because someone had cared enough to make sure she had it. "Better?" Ethan asked quietly. She nodded, unable to trust her voice just yet. A few more bites passed before she finally whispered, "I don't usually do this. Blind dates. Restaurants like this. Any of it, really?" "I could tell," Ethan replied, not unkindly. But it took courage to come. Haley gave a small, dry laugh. "Courage or desperation? Not sure which. Sometimes they're the same thing," he said. The words weren't smooth like a practiced line. They were simple, almost offhand, but they struck her all the same. She glanced at him curiously. "You sound like someone who's had practice at waiting for the wrong people." His lips curved faintly, though not quite into a smile. "Maybe once. A long time ago." He paused, then added, "The world has a way of teaching us to expect disappointment. But it doesn't mean you were wrong to hope." Haley looked down at her hands. All her life, people had told her she was too soft, too trusting, too willing to believe. Yet, here was a man who made it sound like hope was not weakness, but strength. She met his eyes again, her voice softer now. "And what about you? Why are you here alone?" He considered the question, swirling the glass of water in his hand before answering. "Because sometimes even people who seem to have everything don't. Money fills tables, not chairs." Haley blinked at the honesty in his tone. He wasn't boasting, and he wasn't fishing for sympathy. He was telling the truth in a way that felt startlingly real. The conversation slipped into quieter rhythms after that. They spoke of small things, coffee preferences, books left unfinished, the strange comfort of rainy afternoons. It wasn't what they said that mattered, but the way it felt. Neither of them was trying to impress or pretend. They were simply there, Two people who had both known loneliness, finding the rare relief of being seen. For the first time in a very long time, Haley didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of the world alone. A seed of trust had been planted. The cafe door jingled softly as Haley stepped inside, brushing the cool morning air from her shoulders. The place was small but cozy, tucked between a bookstore and the library she often visited. The scent of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon pastries wrapped around her like a blanket. She carried her worn coin purse in her hand, ready to count out exact change for the cheapest item on the menu. Just as she always did, as she studied the chalkboard listing, a familiar voice broke through the low chatter. "Make that 2, a man said to the barista. "She looks like someone who might need oat milk today." Haley turned, startled. There he was again, Ethan Blake, the man from the restaurant, sitting in the corner with a laptop open. His sleeves were rolled up neatly, his tie missing, his demeanor softer than the last time she had seen him. The CEO she had glimpsed across a candlelit table now looked more like a man easing into his morning routine. "You remembered me?" she said hesitantly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I remembered your courage," he replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Name was the easy part. The barista handed her the cup, and Haley crossed the room to join him. She slid into the chair opposite his, the same position she had taken before. Though this time there was no candle, no pity, only quiet curiosity. For a moment, silence hovered between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows, painting soft golden streaks across the wooden tables. Haley cupped her coffee, savoring the warmth against her palms. Ethan closed his laptop slightly and leaned back. "You want to hear about the time my company almost ruined its reputation with one bad slogan?" Haley raised a brow, amused despite herself. "That sounds like something you're not supposed to admit." "Oh, trust me, it's worse than you think," Ethan said, his voice lightening with each word. "We launched a new snack for toddlers, trying to make it sound fun and healthy. Instead, our slogan ended up suggesting, well, let's just say it sounded like we were promoting chewing gum for babies." Haley blinked, then burst into laughter, her hand flying to her mouth. The sound surprised her, bubbling out freely for the first time in weeks. Ethan grinned, encouraged. It went viral for all the wrong reasons. A food influencer roasted us, complete with a meme of a toddler blowing bubbles. Not exactly the professional image we were going for. She shook her head, still laughing. "And you're telling me this why?" "Because," he said, shrugging, "it's proof that I've made mistakes too. Expensive ones. Embarrassing ones. And I survived." Haley's laughter softened into a smile that lingered. For once, the heaviness in her chest lifted. Sitting there, sipping coffee with a man who wasn't trying to impress her, but to make her laugh. She felt lighter than she had in months. The library's glass doors opened with a quiet creak as Haley stepped inside, balancing a small stack of borrowed nursing books against her chest. She loved this place, tucked away from the busy streets, filled with the hushed comfort of pages turning and whispers drifting across the aisles. It was her secret refuge, a space that felt safe. She was halfway to the study corner when she froze. Near the children's section, Ethan stood with a little girl at his side. She couldn't have been more than 3, wearing a yellow sweater dress, her hair in soft pigtails. Ethan's hand rested gently on her small shoulder as he crouched to return a book to the shelf. Haley hesitated, suddenly aware of how much she was intruding. But Ethan glanced up, his expression shifting instantly into warmth. "Hey," he said softly, as though he hadn't expected to see her, but was quietly glad she was there. "This is Lily," he added, turning toward the child. "She's my daughter." Haley's eyebrows lifted. She hadn't imagined this man, the confident, put-together CEO, also being a father. But the tenderness in his voice when he said her name told her more about him than his tailored suits ever had. Haley crouched slightly, setting her books on the low table beside her. "Hi, Lily," she said gently. The little girl peeked out from behind her father's leg, her wide eyes studying Haley carefully. Then, with the boldness only children possess, she stepped closer and reached out to touch the hem of Haley's cardigan. Her small fingers brushed the fabric as if testing it. "She's pretty," Lily whispered. Haley chuckled softly. "You're very pretty too," but the child didn't retreat. Instead, she leaned closer, sniffing faintly, and then said in the simplest, most innocent tone, "She smells like Mommy." The words hung in the air, fragile and devastating all at once. Haley's breath caught. She glanced quickly at Ethan, whose face had gone still, every muscle tightening in quiet shock. His hand trembled slightly where it rested on his daughter's shoulder. Haley knelt fully now, her voice careful, steady despite the lump in her throat. "That's a very big compliment, Lily," she said softly. "Your mommy must have smelled like kindness." The little girl nodded with solemn certainty, then skipped off toward the picture books without another word. For a moment, silence wrapped around them. Ethan stared after his daughter, his jaw working as if he were holding back a flood of memories. His eyes shone faintly, and when he finally looked at Haley, something in his guarded expression had cracked open. "She passed 2 years ago," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Lily doesn't usually say things like that." Haley placed a hand gently over her books, her heart heavy with empathy. "Children remember more with their hearts than with their heads," she said. Ethan blinked, his throat tightening, but nodded slowly. And in that fragile silence, without promises or declarations, a new bond began to take root, born from grief, innocence, and the possibility of healing. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and medicine, the kind of mix that clung to the air when someone had been fighting off an illness. Ethan paced quietly in the living room, phone still warm from the call he had made earlier. His daughter lay curled on the couch, cheeks flushed with fever, her small body restless beneath a blanket that seemed too heavy for her frame. When the knock came at the door, it was soft but certain. Ethan opened it to find Haley standing there, a modest canvas bag hanging from her shoulder. Her eyes went straight to the couch, where Lily stirred and let out a faint whimper. "You didn't sound okay on the phone," Haley said gently, stepping inside without hesitation. She set her bag down, brushing stray hair from her face as she crossed to the child. Kneeling beside Lily, she placed a cool hand against her forehead. "Poor thing," she whispered, her voice threaded with calm assurance. From the bag, she pulled out a small towel wrapped in wax paper. She unfolded it, revealing a lavender-scented compress she had prepared at home. "This always helped at the hospital," she said softly, laying the cool cloth across Lily's forehead. "Lavender eases the head and the heart." Lily sighed, her tiny body relaxing beneath the touch. Her eyelids fluttered, then settled, the tension in her features softening. Ethan stood just behind them, watching as Haley worked with quiet precision, no fuss, no fear. Then almost instinctively, Haley began to hum. The tune was delicate, drifting like a thread through the stillness. Ethan froze, his chest constricted, his breath shallow. He knew that melody. He hadn't heard it in nearly 3 years. It was the lullaby his wife used to sing, the one she had altered with silly little words so Lily would giggle even through tears. "The moon wears socks when it's cold at night." The nonsense lyrics filled the room like a ghost, familiar and aching. Haley's voice wavered for half a beat as she noticed Ethan's stillness, but she didn't stop. She sang quietly, her tones soothing, steady, her hand gently brushing strands of hair from Lily's damp forehead. And Ethan, he broke. Silent tears welled and spilled before he could stop them, years of control dissolving under the weight of memory. He sank into the armchair, hands covering his face. The sound of his own quiet sobs surprised him. He hadn't cried since the funeral, hadn't allowed himself to. When the lullaby ended, Haley turned slightly, her expression tender but not pitying. She saw the man who carried the world on his shoulders, finally letting it down. "If only for a moment. I didn't know," she whispered, her voice hushed, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace. "You couldn't have," Ethan managed, his voice breaking. He shook his head, wiping at his cheeks. "She used to sing that every night." "I thought Lily had forgotten." Haley looked down at the sleeping child. "Children don't forget love," she murmured. "They just wait to hear it again." The words settled into the silence, a balm to wounds unspoken. Ethan lifted his eyes, raw and wet, and for the first time in years, allowed himself to be seen, not as the unshakable CEO, not as the single father carrying everything, but simply as a man who had lost and was learning to feel again. The envelope sat on Haley's kitchen table for 3 days before she found the courage to open it. Her hands shook as she slid a finger beneath the seal, unfolding the paper inside. The first line blurred, and then sharpened again as tears welled in her eyes. Full tuition. 1-year pediatric specialization, Oregon. She pressed the page against her chest, her breath catching. It was everything she had worked for, everything she had prayed for on nights when exhaustion threatened to swallow her. But beneath the elation was a tightening ache, because the scholarship meant leaving. When she finally told Ethan, they were sitting on a park bench while Lily chased soap bubbles on the grass. Haley's fingers toyed with the folded letter in her lap, her voice barely above a whisper. "I got it," she said. Ethan turned, eyebrows raised, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "Haley, that's incredible." Her throat tightened. "It's in Oregon. Starts in August. A full year away." The wind rustled through the trees, scattering golden leaves across their feet. Ethan didn't speak immediately. His gaze followed Lily as she laughed and leapt at a bubble just out of reach. Finally, he leaned back against the bench, his voice calm but steady. "You should go." Her head snapped toward him, eyes wide. "You think so? Even if it means leaving you and Lily?" He gave a slow nod. "You earned this. Don't let fear or guilt chain you here." "But what if—" her voice faltered. "What if you think I'm abandoning you? That I used you for stability and now I'm just walking away?" Ethan turned to her fully, his expression softening, his voice deep but gentle. "Loving someone doesn't mean clipping their wings." "Haley, it means letting them fly, even if it hurts." The words hit her harder than she expected, settling deep inside the fragile places she had always carried. For so long she had believed love was measured in how tightly someone held on. But here he was, teaching her that true love meant the opposite. Her vision blurred as she blinked fast, forcing the tears back. She turned toward Lily, who was now clapping at a bubble that finally popped in her hands. For a moment, the child's laughter filled the silence, a reminder of why they both had to be brave. Haley swallowed hard, tucking the letter back into her coat pocket. "I don't want to lose what we have." "You won't," Ethan said firmly. "Because what we have isn't built on convenience or proximity. It's built on choice." She drew in a shaky breath, her chest heavy, but her heart strangely light. The ache of goodbye was already pressing against her, but beneath it lived something stronger. Hope. When they rose from the bench, Ethan reached for Lily's hand, while Haley walked quietly beside them. No grand declarations, no promises carved into stone, just the silent bond of people choosing to let each other grow, even if it meant parting ways. The rooftop garden shimmered in the late afternoon sun, string lights swaying gently in the breeze. Rows of white chairs faced a podium framed by herbs and blooming flowers. Beyond the railing, the city stretched wide and glowing, as if holding its breath for something new. Haley stepped out of the elevator. Her heart racing faster than her heels clicked against the stone floor. She clutched the simple white invitation that had arrived at the hospital that morning. Product launch, rooftop. 3 p.m. Blake Nutrition by Co. Her breath caught when she saw the long table in the center of the space. Pastel packaging gleamed in neat rows, each box marked with the words, "Her first spoon." She froze. The logo, a silhouette of a woman cradling a child, spoon in hand, was unmistakable, subtle, but it was her. Her dignity, her courage, her night at the lonely table transfigured into something new. Her eyes blurred. She had returned a nurse, stronger and steadier, but she had not expected this. Near the podium stood Ethan, suit jacket tailored, voice steady as he addressed a small crowd of investors, staff and journalists. His words weren't grandiose, but honest. This product isn't about profits. It's about dignity. For the women who give even when they go hungry. For the men who learn that strength is gentleness. For the children who deserve both. The crowd applauded. But as he stepped down, his eyes found hers. It was only a second, a heartbeat, but in that gaze was every word unsaid, every memory carried. He crossed the space slowly, unhurried, ignoring the outstretched hands and polite congratulations. He stopped in front of her, his presence as calm as the day they first shared a table. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said softly. "I wasn't sure you'd still remember me," she whispered back, her throat tight. Impossible. The faintest smile tugged at his lips. For a moment, the buzz of voices and clinking glasses faded. They stood at the edge of a new beginning, the city below, the garden alive around them. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. He didn't kneel. He didn't raise his voice. He simply opened it, revealing a simple ring, delicate, unassuming, like a promise made in quiet strength. "I don't want to save you," he said gently. "I want to stay if you'll let me." Her breath trembled. No sweeping speeches, no grand gestures, just honesty offered like a hand reaching across years of loneliness. She nodded once, eyes shimmering, her chest full, because this wasn't about rescue. It was about return, about choice, about two people who had finally found home in themselves and in each other. The restaurant looked almost exactly as it had that first night. The warm glow of the sconces, the polished wood, the faint hum of conversation rising and falling like a tide. But for Haley, stepping through those doors now felt entirely different. Her hand was gently clasped in Ethan's, their fingers laced with the ease of something earned, not borrowed. Just ahead, Lily trotted, her little pigtails bouncing, navy dress swaying as she tugged them toward the hostess stand. "This way," the hostess said warmly, leading them not to a corner for one, not to a table set for two, but to a familiar spot now arranged with 3 chairs. Haley's chest tightened. She remembered the first time she'd sat here, nerves knotted, her hands clutching a purse that held only $5. She remembered the sting of humiliation, the cruel text, the weight of being invisible. But tonight, nothing about this table felt empty. Tonight, she belonged. Ethan pulled out a chair for her before helping Lily into hers. Haley sank into her seat, glancing around at the room. The same light flickered from the candles, the same soft music drifted in the air. But what filled the table was utterly new. A server appeared with menus. Ethan smiled, his tone teasing but tender. "Order everything you want. Tonight we eat for the girl who waited 45 minutes and still believed someone would show up." Haley let out a soft laugh, her eyes shimmering. "You remember everything?" "I remember you," he said simply. Just then, Lily dug into her small backpack and triumphantly pulled out a folded piece of paper. She spread it across the table with the flourish of an artist presenting her masterpiece. It was a drawing, 3 stick figures at a table, spaghetti piled high in front of them, a sun smiling down from above. One figure had long yellow hair, another tall with glasses, and the smallest one wore bright purple shoes. Above them, in shaky crayon letters, Lily had written, "Us." Haley's breath caught. Her hand reached out, fingertips brushing the paper as her vision blurred with tears she didn't bother to hide. "This is us?" she asked gently. Lily nodded, grinning.
At dinner.
"Because Mommy Haley likes spaghetti." The words landed like a gift wrapped in innocence, pure and unfiltered. Ethan's eyes flicked from the drawing to Haley, his face unreadable, but his hand sliding across the table until it found hers. For a moment, silence wrapped around them, soft and full. No speeches,
No declarations.
just the flicker of candlelight, the weight of joined hands, and a child's simple truth binding them together. Haley swallowed past the lump in her throat and whispered, steady but trembling, "I waited for so long. But maybe I was never waiting for the wrong person, just for the right table." Ethan's thumb brushed her knuckles. Lily giggled, twirling her fork in the air like a wand. And in that small corner of a modest restaurant, 3 chairs filled a table that no longer felt lonely, but whole.